A view of the diseases and remedies of the savages. The savages are a robust and vigorous sort of people, of a sanguine temperament and an admirable complexion. They are unacquainted with a great many diseases that afflict the Europeans, such as the gout, gravel, dropsy, etc. Their health is firm, notwithstanding that they use no precaution to preserve it. For on the contrary, one would think that they weaken themselves by the violent exercises of dancing, hunting, and warlike expeditions, in which they have frequent returns of heats and colds in one day, which in Europe would occasion a mortal distemper. Sometimes, indeed, they are seized with pleurisy, but these are as unfrequent as they are mortal, for this is the only distemper that all their remedies cannot conquer. The smallpox are as common in the north of Canada as the great pox are to the southward. In the winter time, the smallpox is very dangerous by reason of the difficulty of respiration. But notwithstanding that 'tis mortal, the savages matter it so little that when 'tis upon 'em, they walk about from hut to hut if they are able, or if they have not strength to walk, are carried about by their slaves. In the Illinois country and near the Mississippi, the venereal distemper is very common. I remember that in the interview I had with the Arkansas upon that great river at the mouth of the Missouris, as I said in my 16th letter, I saw a savage who, uncovering himself, shewed me part of his body that was ready to fall off through rottenness. At that time he was busied in boiling roots, and after I had asked him the use of them, he gave me to understand by his interpreter that he hoped to be cured in a month's time by drinking the juice of these roots and eating constantly the broth or decoction of meat and fish. Brandy makes a terrible havoc among the people of Canada, for those who drink it are much more numerous than those who have the power to abstain from it. That liquor, which of itself is murdering stuff, and which is brewed and adulterated before 'tis imported into this country, sweeps off men so fast that one who has not seen the fatal effects of it can scarce credit them. It extinguishes their natural heat, and throws almost all of them into that languishing disorder which we call a consumption. They look pale, livid, and ghastly like skeletons. Their feasts are the bane and entire ruin of their stomachs, as being nothing but plentiful entertainments, at which they value themselves upon leaving nothing. They pretend that by virtue of their drinking great quantities of water and broth, they digest their victuals with greater facility than the Europeans, who load their stomachs with wine and other liquors that produce crudities. The savages are not at all alarmed by sickness, for they fear death much less than the pain and duration of their illness. When they are sick, they only drink broth and eat sparingly, and if they have the good luck to fall asleep, they think themselves cured. They have told me frequently that sleeping and sweating would cure the most stubborn diseases in the world. When they are so weak that they cannot get out of bed, their relations come and dance and make merry before them in order to divert them. To conclude, when they are ill, they are always visited by a sort of quacks, jongleurs, of whom 'twill now be proper to subjoin 2 or 3 words by the by. A jongleur is a sort of physician, or rather a quack, who being once cured of some dangerous distemper, has the presumption and folly to fancy that he is immortal and possessed of the power of curing all diseases by speaking to the good and evil spirits. Now, though everybody rallies upon these fellows when they are absent, and looks upon them as fools that have lost their senses by some violent distemper, yet they allow them to visit the sick, whether it be to divert them with their idle stories, or to have an opportunity of seeing them rave, skip about, cry, howl, and make grimaces and wry faces as if they were possessed. When all the bustle is over, they demand a feast of a stag and some large trout for the company, who are thus regaled at once with diversion and good cheer. When the quack comes to visit the patient, he examines him very carefully. If the evil spirit be here, says he, we shall quickly dislodge him. This said, he withdraws by himself to a little tent made on purpose, where he dances and sings howling like an owl, which gives the Jesuits occasion to say that the devil converses with them. After he has made an end of this quack jargon, he comes and rubs the patient in some part of his body, and pulling some little bones out of his mouth, acquaints the patient that these very bones came out of his body, that he ought to pluck up a good heart, in regard that his distemper is but a trifle, and in fine, that in order to accelerate the cure, 'twill be convenient to send his own and his relations' slaves to shoot elks, deer, etc., to the end that they may eat all of that sort of meat, upon which his cure does absolutely depend. Commonly these quacks bring 'em some juices of plants, which are a sort of purges, and are called maskikik, but the patients choose to keep 'em by 'em, rather than to drink them, for they think all purgatives inflame the mass of the blood, and weaken the veins and arteries by their violent shocks. All their cure consists of sweating well, in drinking broth, in keeping themselves very warm, in sleeping if they can, and in drinking the lake water or spring water, in the paroxysms of fevers, as well as in other distempers. They cannot conceive how he come to be such fools as to make use of vomits, for whenever they see a Frenchman take down such a violent remedy, they cannot forbear saying that he swallows an Iroquois. They plead that this sort of remedy shakes the whole machine, and makes terrible efforts upon all the inward parts. But they are yet more astonished at our custom of bleeding. For, say they, the blood being the taper of life, we have more occasion to pour it in than to take out, considering that life sinks when its principal cause is moved off, from whence 'tis a natural consequence that after a loss of blood nature acts but feebly and heavily, the entrails are overheated and all the parts are dried, which gives rise to all the diseases that afflict the Europeans. The savages are never 8 days together without sweating, whether they be well or bad. Only they observe this difference, that when they are perfectly well they throw themselves, while the sweating moisture is yet upon them, into the river in summer, and into the snow in winter. Whereas when they are out of order, they go immediately into a warm bed. 5 or 6 savages may sweat conveniently in the place allotted for that use, which is a sort of oven or stove covered with mats, skins, etc. In the middle of this baño there stands a dish or porringer full of burning brandy, or of great red hot stones, which occasions such a piercing heat that in the twinkling of an eye they sweat prodigiously. They never make use of hot baths or glisters, unless it be when they are over-persuaded by the Jesuits and our physicians. I remember that in a conference I had one day with a savage, the barbarian said with a great deal of sense that a good air, good water, and contentment of mind could not indeed keep a man's life from coming to an end, but that at least it must be owned that these advantages contribute in a great measure to make a man run through the course of his life without being sensible of any disorder or inconveniency. They make a jest of the impatience of the Europeans, who would be cursed as soon as they are sick. They allege that our fear of death, occasioned by the invasion of the least fever, does so inflame and fortify the disease that oftentimes we fall a sacrifice to fear itself. Whereas if we looked upon our illness as a trifle, as well as death, and kept our bed with patience and a good heart, without offering violence to nature, by cramming down drugs and medicines, the good old dame would not fail to comfort and refresh us by degrees. The savages are always against the making use of our surgeons and physicians. They affirm that all mixtures of drugs are poison that destroys natural heat and consumes the breast, and that glisters are only proper for the Europeans, though after all they sometimes make use of them when the French resort to their villages. They are of the opinion that the observing of a diet heats the blood, and that 'Tis of dangerous consequence to balk the appetite as to what it craves, provided the aliment hath a good juice. The meat that they eat is little more than half done, but their fish is always overboiled. They never touch salad, upon the plea that all cold herbs oblige the stomach to hard labor. There's no wound or dislocation that they cannot cure with the simples or plants, whose virtues they are well acquainted with, and, which indeed is singular, their wounds never run to a gangrene. But after all, this is not to be imputed to these herbs, nor to the air of the country, but to their hale constitution. For notwithstanding the use of these very remedies, a gangrene invades the wounds of the French, who, questionless, are harder to cure than the savages. These people attribute our liableness to gangrenes, and indeed all our diseases, to the salt that we eat, for they cannot taste any salt thing without being sick unto death and drinking perpetually. They cannot be persuaded to drink ice water, for they allege that it enfeebles the stomach and retards digestion. Such, sir, are their fanatical opinions of things, which proceed from their prepossession and bigotry with reference to their own customs and ways of living. 'Tis in vain to visit them when they lie at the point of death, in order to press them to bleed or take a purge, for they still make answer that they cannot consent to the forwarding of their death by the remedies of the French, which they take to be as bad as the persons who exhibit them. As soon as a savage dies, he is dressed as neatly as can be, and his relations' slaves come and mourn over him. Neither mother, sister, nor brother shews the least mark of affliction. They say, their deceased friend is happy in being thus exempted from farther sufferings. For this good people believe, and not without reason, that death is a passage to a better life. When the corpse are dressed, they set them upon a mat in the same posture as if the person were alive, and his relations being set round him, every one in his turn addresses him with a harangue, recounting all his exploits, as well as those of his ancestors. He that speaks last expresses himself to this purpose. You, such a one, you sit now along with us, and have the same shape that we have. You want neither arms, nor head, nor legs, but at the same time you cease to be, and begin to evaporate like the smoke of a pipe. Who is it that talked with us but 2 days ago? Sure, 'twas not you, for then you would speak to us still. It must therefore be your soul, which is now lodged in the great country of souls, along with those of our nation. This body which we now behold will in 6 months' time become what it was 200 years ago. Thou feelest nothing, thou knowest nothing, and thou seest nothing, because thou art nothing. Nevertheless, out of the friendship we had for thy body, while animated by thy spirit, we thus tender the marks of that veneration which is due to our brethren and our friends. After they have made an end of their harangues, the male relations remove to make room for the she-friends, who make him the like compliment. This done, they shut the corpse up 24 hours in the hut for the dead, and during that time are employed in dances and feasts, which are far from bearing a mournful show. After the 24 hours are expired, the slaves of the deceased person carry his corpse upon their backs to the burying place, where it is laid upon stakes that are 10 foot high, in a double coffin of bark, with his arms and some pipes with tobacco and Indian corn put up in the same coffin. When the slaves are carrying the corpse to the burying place, the male and female relations accompany them, dancing all the while, and the rest of the savages of the deceased person carry some baggage, which the relations present to the dead person and lay upon his coffin. The savages that live upon the long river burn their corpse, as I insinuated before, but you must know that they keep them in vaults or cellars till they have a sufficient number to burn together, which is performed out of the village, in a place set apart for that ceremony. In fine, the savages know no such thing as mourning, and never mention the dead in particular. I mean, they never repeat their names. They deride us when they hear us recount the fate of our parents, our kings, our generals, etc. Upon the death of a savage, his slaves marry the other women's slaves, and live by themselves in a distinct hut, as being then free, or such as have no master to serve. The children that sprang from this sort of marriages are adopted and reputed the children of the nation, by reason of their being born in the village and in the country. There's no reason, say they, that such children should bear the misfortunes of their parents, or come into the world in slavery, since they contributed nothing towards their creation. These slaves take care to go every day to the foot of their master's coffin, and there offer some pipes and tobacco as a grateful acknowledgement of their liberty. But now that I am got upon the subject of tobacco, I must acquaint you that almost all the savages smoke, but they never chew tobacco, nor take it in snuff. They sow and reap a great deal of it, but then it differs from what we have in Europe, though our first seed came from America, and in regard that 'tis in a matter good for nothing, they are forced to buy up Brazil tobacco, which they mix with a certain leaf of an agreeable smell, called sagacomi. I have nothing more to say upon this head, for I think I have given you a sufficient account of their diseases and of their remedies, which in my opinion are as savage as themselves. But let that be as it will, 'tis certain they seldom die of any other distemper than of a pleurisy. As for the other diseases, they get over them with the greatest danger in the world, for setting aside their courage and patience, which goes beyond anything that we can imagine, they take all the ways of the world to burst themselves by eating and drinking when they have gross fevers upon them, and when the fit is over, smoking that Brazil tobacco, which without dispute is the strongest sort that we know of. The women of this country are subject to the natural disorders as well as elsewhere, and sometimes die of them. 'Tis true they have an admirable remedy for redressing the disorders that flow from that source. I mean, a certain potion, but it hath no operation unless they abstain from all manner of excess, which they are very unwilling to do. Some French surgeons assured me that the European women void a much greater quantity and hold the flux longer upon them than these Americans, who seldom have those upon them above 2 days at a time. Another inconvenience that frequently annoys them is an overbearing quantity of milk, for which they used to put little puppies to suck their breasts.